Okay, for our gradient assignment in Illustrator, we are going to be making an emoji face. And this is the one that I'm going to teach you how to do right now. If you go to Schoology, you can see that I have an assignment. It's in the assignments folder. It's called Illustrator Emoji, and we'll read through this quickly together. It says, using our knowledge of gradients in Illustrator, we are going to create 2 different emoji. Below is a video tutorial, which you're watching right now, for the first one, which we are going to do together, and then you will make the second emoji on your own. You can choose one of the other 11 emoji in the image below, or you can make up your very own emoji face. The choice is yours. So these are the steps you need to do. Number 1, you should watch the gradients lesson video. If you haven't done that yet, you need to pause this video and go back and watch that one first. Number 2, you're going to watch this video that I'm doing right now and follow along with me. We're going to make an emoji in Illustrator. Then, after you've done that, you're going to make your own emoji face, and when you have both your emoji finished, you're going to save them as JPEGs and turn them in on Schoology. So down here, I've got 12 different emoji that you can choose from for yours, and I'll show you how to put this into Illustrator. So first, we're going to download this image. Okay, let's get started. So I'm going to go to Illustrator, and I'm going to start by making a new document. So I'll go up to File, and then New. Okay, when this pops open, I'm going to go to the Print tab, and for this I'm going to choose the tabloid option, and then over here on the side I'm going to change this to be in inches, and we want to make this paper be horizontal so that it's like longer, it's wider than it is tall. Once we have those chosen, we'll hit Create, and it will open up a new blank document for us that looks like this. Okay, now I'm going to put in that emoji image so we can see it for reference. I downloaded it already, so I'm going to go to File, and then Place. And in here I'm going to go to my Downloads folder, and you should see it in your downloads. It's called emoji.jpg. We're going to place that in here. You can see it kind of attaches it to your mouse. I'm just going to click once, and it will put it in here for me. So I'm going to, you can see there's a lot of options. I'm going to leave it pretty big so that we can kind of see what we're working on. I'll just sort of scoot off to the side because we're going to make this little smiley face guy here together first. All right, so first thing that we need to do is, now that we understand gradients, because you already watched that video, we're going to come over here and grab our ellipse tool. And I'm going to draw a perfect circle by holding down Shift. So I'm going to make sure that this is totally round. After I have a circle, I'm going to go over to my gradients panel on the right, and we are going to apply a gradient just by clicking on this little thumbnail right here, and it will automatically add a black to white gradient for us, just linear. So the first thing we need to do is we need to change this linear gradient right here. It says Type to be a radial gradient. Okay. And that changes it so that now it looks round. And now we are going to add some actual color here because obviously we don't want it black and white. So the white, you'll notice, is on the inside and the black paint bucket is on the outside. So we're going to start with the black one. I'm going to just double click on this little paint bucket over here on the right side. And it's going to pop open this little color menu. If you remember from the gradient lesson, if we need to see the colors, which we do, we're going to click on this top right little corner option right here and choose CMYK, which will allow us to have the color options. So around the outside it looks like there's sort of this like darkish orange color. So I'm going to come in here and kind of choose something. It's sort of like a warm, sort of dark orange color. Maybe something like that. Okay. Then I'm going to click back to my gradients menu, and I'm going to double click on the white one, and same thing, we'll click here, choose CMYK, and for this one we are going to choose a nice bright orangey yellow color, a very warm yellow. We want it to be really bright yellow. Okay. Now you'll notice, let me click out of this and close this up. You'll notice that we do in fact have an orange to yellow gradient, but right now we need the orange to be closer to the edge, and the yellow should be taking up most of the space here, whereas it looks like it's sort of mostly orange. So I'm going to come back to my gradients panel, And this little diamond in the middle, I'm going to drag this closer to the orange one, which is going to kind of push the orange to be closer to the outside. So I'm going to just sort of pull this over pretty close to that orange. And that should, I think that's as close as it's going to go. All right, so that's not too bad. We're looking pretty good so far. We've got kind of a nice orange on the outside, a nice warm yellow on the inside. Looking pretty good. Now, the next thing we need to do is, if you look at this smiley face emoji, you'll notice that there is sort of this like sheen. It looks like it's sort of shiny with this little white thing at the top. All the emojis have this little like shiny piece on their forehead almost. It just makes it look like it's sort of like reflecting the light. So we're going to make that piece because we want our emoji to look glossy. On Schoology, one of our requirements, which we didn't read through, it says, is that your emoji should have a glossy look to it. And that's how we're going to kind of create that, is with this little white thing. So I'm going to get my circle tool again, and I'm going to draw a circle, holding shift down. It should be a perfect circle. And this one I'm going to make be just a little bit smaller than my original circle. So again, if you hold shift down and just drag the corners, you can kind of resize it. And we want it to fit probably about like this big. So you can see the amount of space it leaves around the outside edge. We want it to kind of be about like that. Okay, once we have it about this size, and in fact, I think I might even squish this slightly so it's not totally a perfect circle. Just because you can see it kind of comes in on the edges. I'll just make it a little tiny bit oval. Now that we have it the way I want it, I'm going to just select it, go back over here to my gradients panel, and this one we're going to need to do a gradient that fades off into nothing. So it starts with white and then it fades away. So first thing is we're going to, in this little option right here, we're going to click on the little arrow next to it, and we're going to choose the one that says Fading Sky. The Fading Sky gradient is going to give us the option to have it just sort of fade into nothing. And it automatically sets it to be blue, which we don't really want. So on our little paint buckets, we're going to double click on it, and we'll make this paint bucket be white. The other one, same thing. We're going to double click and make it white as well. Okay, so this is starting to look a little bit better. We can kind of see it's fading off on this very bottom edge right here on the side. And but the problem is we need it to be turned so that the white part is at the top and then it fades to the bottom, and we also want it to fade a little bit more than it is right now. So I'm going to select this shape and then grab my gradient tool over here on the toolbar. The shortcut for it is G. And I'm going to draw a new line. Right now the line is going side to side, so I'm going to draw one starting at the top, going straight down to the bottom. And you want it to be really straight. If you hold shift, it will make sure it is perfectly straight. And you'll notice that that draws in the gradient. Now, when you're doing this, if you want to redraw it, don't try and draw on top of it. That will just be frustrating. Just kind of draw a little bit off to the side, same thing, and it will snap it back into the middle when you're done. Now you'll notice, when I click off of this, that it's a little bit like it's still too white in the middle. We don't quite want that. So I'm going to use my gradient tool and draw another one that maybe stops like about halfway into the middle. So now it kind of, the white fades sort of about midway into here. Okay, the last thing we're going to do to make this look just a little tiny bit less glossy is I'm going to come up here, have it selected, up in the options bar where it says opacity right here. I'm going to open this little slider and maybe just turn it down to like 80% about, somewhere close to 80%. And that will just make it so it's a little bit more see-through, and we can see the yellow through it just a little bit more. Okay, so we've got our background kind of set up, the emoji face, it's looking pretty good. Now the next thing we're going to do are the eyes and the mouth. So let's start with the eyes. Okay, for my eyes, I'm going to get my ellipse tool again, and when you're choosing which one you want to do, it's going to be the same process. You just have to kind of look at what shapes you are going to need, and then you're going to draw them. My suggestion would be that you're probably going to have the easiest time using the regular shape tool and then trying to use like the pathfinder, which helps us cut shapes apart, to kind of manipulate that shape into what you want it, or use the white mouse to kind of curve the edges in. You could use just the plain old pen tool, but that's going to take a long time and it's probably not going to look very good. So I would recommend using just your shape tool when you're doing your own, okay? All right, so I'm going to draw an oval, like roughly this size. And for now, it's giving me that fading sky gradient again. I'm going to just come over here to my gradients panel and switch this back to white and black just for the time being, just so I can like actually see what I'm doing here. Okay, so I've got this eyeball, and we need to kind of like cut off the bottom. If you look at the sample one, you can see that the eye kind of goes up. So what I'm going to do for that effect is I'm going to grab this, hold down the Alt key on my keyboard, and I'm going to drag a copy of this. So now I have two, and I'm just going to slightly overlap this bottom one over my top one, kind of however much I want to cut off this eyeball. So maybe something about like this, and I might even make this a little bit wider. Just so that if you look at this top part that's being overlapped right now, I just want that to kind of look like the shape on that eye right there. So maybe this should be a little bit more flat. Okay, once you're happy with kind of how your overlap is looking, what your eyeball shape is looking like, what we're going to do is I'm going to, using my black mouse, select both of these pieces. So I'll select one of them, I'll hold down Shift on my keyboard and select the other one, so now they're both selected. Then I'm going to come over to my Pathfinder, I'm going to click on the Divide button, and that cuts it. Next we need to ungroup, so I will right click on it, select Ungroup, and then click off in the white. And now this allows me to come back in here and I can erase these pieces, and I'm like, what the, I didn't cut it, but it did, there's just two layers. So I'll cut that off, and now I have myself a nice little eye emoji that looks pretty similar to that one. Okay, so we've got this. This is looking pretty good, but we need to kind of round up the edges. That's one thing that needs to change. So I'm going to come in here, zoom up with, I'm pushing Control plus on my keyboard. Remember, Control minus zooms you out, Control plus zooms you in. I'm going to grab my white mouse, which allows me to see these little white dots on the corners of my shape. I'm going to grab those little corners and just kind of bring it up so that they're curved now. So my little eye is no longer pointy on the bottom edge. This is one characteristic of emojis. Whenever you're doing these shapes, they should be pretty curved on the edges. None of these shapes are very sharp looking. They're all very curvy. So always make sure that you do that when you're trying to make an emoji. Okay, so we've got one good eye. It needs to have a different color though. If we look at our example, it kind of looks like it's a brown to like a dark brown sort of around the outside edges. So we're going to try and manipulate our gradient to be that. So I'm going to open my gradients panel, and first maybe let's try changing this to be, well, we'll just change the colors first. So my white one, I'm going to double click on the white, and here I'm going to try and choose like kind of a light medium brown color. And then on the black paint bucket, I'm going to double click that, and I'm going to choose sort of like a darker brown color. Almost black even maybe. Okay. And you can see that gives me sort of a gradient on this eyeball. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I want this to be sort of around all the edges, so I'm going to change this to be a radial gradient, which flips it, so now you can see that we've got the light brown on the inside like a circle, and then the dark browns on the outside. I'm going to push my little diamond again closer to the black so that there's more of the light brown. And then I'm also going to get my gradient tool, which you can see when I hover over this, it shows me that it shows me like the line, and then I move my mouse into it, it shows me the outside circle of where this gradient is. I'm just going to grab sort of the side of this dotted circle. There's a little white mark here, and I'm going to kind of like, you can see that you can make it bigger or smaller. That's one thing you can do. If you grab the little black dot on the top, this allows you to kind of make it narrower or taller, right? So I'm going to kind of manipulate this into a oval, and then maybe I'll just sort of rotate it to be that way. Oops. Remember, if you ever mess this up, worst case, just click off and draw a little circle, and then you're just going to draw yourself a new little emoji in the center. So there we go. I'm just going to kind of do that. I'll start kind of right about here, put it up to about there, and then I'm going to smush it in just a little. Oops. Smush it in just a little bit so it's a little bit more oval shaped. Okay, so just play around with your gradient tool and kind of get it so that it looks mostly dark around the edges, a little bit lighter on the inside, and you can again move this little diamond to kind of control that a little bit too. Okay, now after I have this eye looking pretty good, what I'm going to do next is I'm going to duplicate it, because obviously we don't want to do all that work again. So I'm going to just make a copy by holding down the Alt key on my keyboard and scoot it over here so that I now have two eyes. And we have two pretty good looking little eyes. Great. Now our next thing is we're going to make this mouth. And again, this is kind of a shape that I think we should use the shape tool and our pathfinder to make. So I'm going to first draw myself a circle. I'm going to just pretend like this whole mouth is a circle. So I'm going to just draw a circle that's about as wide as I want the mouth to be. And then I'm going to draw a second kind of oval that goes over it. And I'm going to put that on top of it so that at the bottom, if you look here, you can see kind of it's making this sort of smiley face shape. So I'm going to just sort of put that on there until it looks about as fat as I want my smiley face shape to be. And I would say about right there is probably good. So you can kind of see, I'm going to change the color of this one just so you guys can see. You don't need to change it though. So you can see that this brown part is sort of in that smiley face shape. Okay, now same thing. I'm going to select both of these with my black mouse. So click one, hold down Shift, click the next one. And I'm going to go to my Pathfinder palette, open that up, and I'm going to hit the divide button, which cuts it apart. Now we need to ungroup, so I will right click on it. I'll say ungroup, which ungroups it. I'll click off on the side here, and then I can come back in and just select and delete each one of these pieces that I don't want. And I'm left with just this one little smiley mouth. Okay, which looks pretty good, but if you remember I said we always want to make the edges be curved. So let's do that first maybe. I'm going to get my white mouse, zoom in really close here, and you can see that there's that little white dot. I'll just grab that and bring it in so the edges of his mouth is curvy. It's not sharp. And it looks like he's not quite smiling enough. It's sort of like I should have made my circle more round. So if that's the case, I mean, you can always sort of like try to stretch it a little bit down, and then it's maybe too fat, so I'll get my white mouse, and you can edit it just by grabbing individual points to bring it down. So you can just kind of go through and make any manipulations that you want. Okay, just try and touch it up, fix it so it looks pretty good. Oh, I think I just messed that up. No, we'll just leave it. Okay. So we've got our little smiley face. It's looking pretty good. And now what we're going to do next is we're going to, if you look closely at this shape, you'll notice that around the eyes it sort of has this like, oh, not that shape, this one. You'll notice it sort of has this like little rim of yellow, sort of. This is also going to be a gradient, if you can see that little outline. So what we're going to do is on each of these, we are going to add a gradient on the outline, on the stroke. So I'm going to come over to my gradients panel, and over here I'm going to choose the stroke button, make sure it's in the front, and I'm going to apply a gradient. We're going to actually choose the fading sky gradient for this one. Okay, so that added in a gradient that's going to kind of fade out, and you can see it's blue on there right now. It's just sort of blue on this side, and then it fades to nothing on this side. So with my mouth still selected, I'm going to double click, and I'm going to make this be kind of a yellow. I want like a really bright, bright yellow. So you can change your settings however they need to be so you have a bright yellow. And I'll do the same thing to this side. Really bright yellow color. Okay. And it's linear. So now after I have that, if I click off to kind of check it, it's there. You can sort of, if I zoom in really close, you can see that there is a yellow stroke around my mouth, but it's a little bit hard to see. So we're going to try and make it a little bit fatter. So I'm going to select my mouth, and I'm going to go to my stroke panel, which is the 3 lines. And we're going to increase the weight just a little bit. Maybe make it a little bit of a fatter stroke around the outside. So maybe 2 or 3 for me would be good. Okay, and that looks pretty good, I would say. Oh, one thing that you might notice as we look at this mouth, you'll see it kind of looks like there's like 2 strokes on it. There's one on the outside here, and then like it sort of looks like there's a double line on the inside. To get rid of that, what we're going to do is we'll select our mouth, and then over in the strokes panel, we're going to check where it says align stroke. And again, if your stroke currently just looks like this, you're going to click this little show options and it will give you all these other choices. Where it says align stroke, we're going to select the one that says align stroke to outside right here. And that will put all of the stroke outside of your shape, so it kind of looks like that. All right, now we're going to go back to our gradients panel. You'll notice that currently our stroke is on the left, but there's nothing on the right, when really what we kind of want it to be is like on the top, but not really on the bottom. Unfortunately, if you remember back when in the lesson, when you're using the gradient tool to kind of try and change the direction, that will not work if you have a stroke. Like it says, no, we're not going to do that. So the only way for you really to change the direction of a stroke on an outline is to make sure that shape is selected, and then over here in your gradient palette, right here, there's an angle area where you can choose different angles. So I'm going to choose like a -90-degree angle. And what that's going to do is it'll make it so the stroke kind of is on the top, and then it sort of fades out on the bottom instead of being on the left to the right. Okay, so now we're going to go through and I'll do the same thing to each of my eyes. Since I already did all those settings, if I just select the eyeball and then in my gradient panel I can click on this little thumbnail, it should just have those settings on it for me, all the colors. All I have to do now is just switch this again to be -90, go to my stroke panel and move it to the outside and make it a little bit fatter. I'll do the same thing for this eye. Click on this to add the gradient, choose the angle to -90, go to the stroke and increase the fatness, align the stroke on the outside. And that gives me, if we back up a little bit, sort of the glow that goes around the eyes. And actually, now that I look at it, it looks like his eyes are on the bottom, the glow. So maybe instead of -90 on these, I'll put this at 90 degrees. So now it's like glowing on the bottom and the top is not. Yeah, looks like that. Okay, last thing we need to do is we need to have these little rosy cheeks. They're missing the rosy cheeks. So let me move my mouth a little bit over. It's not straight. Okay, what we're going to do is we'll get our circle tool and we're going to draw ourselves a little circle. So just hold shift, draw a circle, maybe about like that. And right now you'll notice that the color that it is sort of what we had for our last shapes that we've done. So we've got this outline and we also have the brown fill. So we don't want either of those. So for the outline, I'm going to hit the none to remove all of the outline. And then on the inside fill part, when I put that in front, I'm going to actually go over to my gradient menu and choose that fading sky one again, which gives us the blue to nothing gradient. Once we're here, I'm going to switch this from being linear to being radial, which makes it a spot. And then instead of blue, I'm going to double click on this paint bucket and set it to be kind of a reddish color, a warm red, on both of the sliders. Maybe a slightly lighter warmish red on the second one. When I click off, it makes it look sort of like there's a little glow. You'll notice it's still like a little bit strong. So same thing, I'm going to click on this again. I'm going to slide this little diamond away from the left just slightly, not very much, just a little bit. And then the opacity up at the top, which just makes it more see-through, I'm going to turn this down actually quite a bit, so maybe to somewhere close to 60%. And that will make it so that it's sort of like a little rosy cheek. Mine maybe is a little too brown, so I'm going to make it a little bit more red. Okay. Once you have that, all we have to do again is copy it by holding down Option and dragging it with our black mouse. So I'm going to drag that over. And we have ourselves a pretty cute little emoji.